microphone? Okay, great. So thank you everyone for being here. We were happy to organize these meetings with Ruby today. As usual, we hope we will be able to reorganize the meeting in presence with artists here at the Collezione Maramotti, but it's a good start, I think, because Ruby is very, very generous and good in speaking about our work. I'm in the exhibition room. The project is titled How to Be Enough, and it's composed by a large, vast drawing. It's almost monumental. It covers the entire central wall of the room where I am now, the Pater room, which is almost 18-meter long and 3-meter high. And it's conceived as a sort of fresco cycle on paper. It's one work, but it's also composed by 15 different sheets of paper. And it's the first time that Ruby confronted herself with such a dimension of work. It wasn't so easy because it's a new thing, it's a new challenge. And also she was able to see the complete work just when we installed it here. In the real world, in her instructions and ideas and indications, and installing. This was the first time for us to install an exhibition with the artist on the other side of the ocean and through Meet or Zoom or whatever. But it was fun, and I think that the result is very good. And we'll be able to share it with the public too. You received already materials about the exhibition, about the project, some pictures. So if you have any kind of questions or curiosities already, we can start from there, or I may start asking something to Ruby. It's up to you. Okay, we'll start. I will start from the fact that Ruby has a long-term relationship with drawing and with paper, because at a certain point of her artistic research, she decided she wanted to focus on this specific material because it's very interesting for her and with very peculiar qualities. And also when she was thinking about this project, she was thinking about how to give a consistency and a special structure to a big artwork which is only composed by paper. So we'll start here. Asking Ruby how her relationship and her study and how she used the paper for this specific artwork.
Yes. So I really love working with paper and find it to be, I studied textiles, and I think that's part of my paper interest. I think if you think of fabric, paper, they share some similar qualities in how they can be handled. And paper for me feels a bit like a fabric in that you can manipulate it, you can cut and stretch it, and it still ends up living. It's not as rigid as some other forms, for me at least. So I love paper. I love the feel of it. I love the way that it moves. If you were to see my studio, I have rolls of paper and glassine, and I'm moving over the paper, and my body now has such a relationship with it that I can handle it, and we can talk, and I can sit on it, and I can lay on it, and I know how much weight it can take and how to move it in a particular way, and I'm enjoying building with people in that way, and to see myself working with it for the next 30 years. So there's just a curiosity about it and a genuine love for the surface of it, the way it feels. And with this piece, I was interested in having the paper. I've often gone back and forth with to frame or not to frame, how to present paper. I've played with stretching paper onto a very rigid structure. And those of you who work with paper, you know that it doesn't want to be flat. It can only pretend for so long, and then at some point, it's moving again. So with this piece, I wanted to fully embrace what paper is, what paper looks like and feels like, and to let it hang, let it drape, to let it have ripples and folds and indentations, and to highlight that by coating the paper so that it's a little bit stiffer. It's still very much paper, but it has some additional weight to it. So we coated it with acrylics and medium and PVA solutions with water so that it has a little bit more structure to it. So the piece at Maramotti, both the front and the back have been coated so that the paper can still hang, but hang with a little more oomph.
Yeah, and because actually here every sheet been treated, as Ruby was saying, and so the surface is really like, and that really gives the sense of amateuricity on the often is just a support or just a base on which something is happening, but it's not really the support which takes its own form, its own substance. And in this case, you can really feel and perceive that also the white spaces where there's no color, no form, no elements, are not flat, are not uniform, are really, and also I was speaking with Ruby once during the installation, because every single, you see a lot of white, because Ruby has this study of composition of forms and elements, which is quite rarefied. So it's not a figuration which is dense, it's something kind of fluctuating in white spaces, but this white is not the same from a point or another in the drawing. They're all different. You have very many nuances of these white tones because they're treated differently and with different medium, with different techniques. And that's very interesting. And regarding these figures and forms that you include and which compose a kind of vocabulary for you, which is a volume, because before this moment, before this step of your research, you told that the single figures and characters have had a more dense narrative quality, and now you're less interested in this matter. You're more interested in the composition, in how they move, how they relate to each other, how they give a direction of your view, of your eye in the space. But anyway, there are recurring elements from years that are architectural elements and pools, divers, dancers. So if we may told us something more about this.
It's, so as Sarah was mentioning, there are now 7 recurring elements. The Ada, who is a fluorescent woman. Architectural references, usually windows, but like that pink window that you see. Swimming pools are an element. Motorcycles. Audrey the leopard, who appears as part leopard, part human. Birds, which are not present in this piece, but they're part of the vocabulary, and the paper itself. And I've been working with all of these motifs since 2012. Over the years, Ada was the first one, and then others were added along the way. And then in the past few months, I let go of about half of them. And the ones that are left are the ones that you see here. And I like the idea of what can happen in terms of composition and conversations between these elements when I have less to work with. So if you imagine having a conversation with someone and you have 10 words, like there's still infinite possibilities of combinations, but you would have to think differently about how to compose the conversation and how to communicate. And that feels like an exciting challenge for me to limit the amount of elements that I have to play with so that I can focus more on what each of them mean, what other, how scale changes their representation or their meaning, and the paper being one of them. Now with less and the paper being so important, I feel as if I can do more, which may change, but now it's wide open for me, and because it's getting too claustrophobic and too narrative and there was too much. So I had to take some things out. But in this piece, you see the ones that are here. It's only been a few months that I've just had these ones. So it's a new process for me to be working with such a limited palette. But I'm coming from a more minimalist hand. I'm coming from making drawings that had no figure and that were just black and white and very much about mark making and about the space. So in some ways, I feel as if I'm returning to, or it's never left. It's been with me the whole time, but I'm giving more space for the part of my aesthetic that really is quite minimal.
May we tell us something more about the divers? Because there are 3 divers in this work. So they're definitely the most represented characters in this specific work. And we have, 2 female, or anyway, something like this, characters here, and Audrey the leopard at the end, diving into the pool. And also dancers. They're both dynamic subjects, but in a way, in the end, in your work, they appear like frozen in this suspended dimension. And you have a strong interest in dance and choreography, and you're dialoguing just in these days with a young scholar, which will be included in your book.
Yeah, the divers are,
and she deals with choreography, so it's really.
Sorry, I think we had a bit of a time lapse. The divers in the work are, I am very interested in diving and swimming, and Sarah and I have talked about this a lot, but I'm a runner. I'm a long distance runner. It's part of how I move in the world, that identity. But I've become very interested both in water as a space and what the potential is there, the movement, but also with divers and swimmers, because I love being in water, even though I know how to swim, but I don't particularly enjoy it. But there's something very liberating about having your body submersed in water and feeling weightless to a certain degree and floating or being carried by the water, obviously very different than walking on solid ground. And with divers, that moment, because I'm so interested in movement and dance and moments within that are right before something happens or taking movement to the edge of something and there's certain anticipation in that. And for divers, that moment right before they dive or when they're mid-air, before they hit the water, is part of where I pull the imagery from. And I hope that the viewer can carry the movement from their bodies. They're frozen, but you can see and hopefully imagine this is a movement that's coming down, or this is a movement that's flipping backwards because of the way their bodies are positioned. So that's part of why I use divers in this way as a tool to carry the eye through the work and to allow for more movement and more relationships with the space.
They're like concentrates of energy ready to spread in a movement, in an action, or something like this. Yeah, I was speaking about dance and about the dialogue with Gaia these days.
Yeah, I'm excited to be talking with Gaia. Yeah, I created a dance company, and I'm working on a dance feature that hopefully will debut at Maramotti. But dance, similarly, I think I can substitute a dancer and a diver. And sometimes they feel like the same types of movement are possible. How a dancer moves through the air, or how a swimmer moves through the water, and that feeling of being one with that element and also interrupting it or being carried by it. But I've been pulling from dance imagery and watching dance, and certainly something I miss right now, but I would frequently go to see live dance in whichever city I was in, and it's been a part of my research now for a while, and just the conversations that happen in dance and happen in other mediums that are about three-dimensional space. It's a very different conversation than working with a flat paper. But if I can think about the paper that appears to be flat as a dancer or choreographer would to a stage, that's part of my challenge and goal in making drawings. My paper's not flat. My paper has depth, and how can I move these around and inside of it as if I was moving and manipulating three-dimensional space.
Yeah, this is dance of techniques which are different, as you were saying, and in movements which are not expressed yet, but they're going to be the moment after. And they're very fascinating, actually, and very, I mean, it's interesting because in a work like this, you can really go back and forth as a visitor, not as an artist studying or working on it. But even as a visitor, you can read it from left to the right, from right to the left, and following all the different directions and movements that the characters and elements are suggesting you in a way, but they're different. They may change in the same day or just the moment after. So it's really not static in any sense. And in addition to choreography and dance, you're also maybe interested in cinema and in movies, because these pictures, these figures have something of cinematic, like if they were video still or something. And of course, you're very, I think very passionate about poetry and literature, at least from the titles you give to your works, because the title of the work and of the project is How to Be Enough, but every single panels here have two subtitles, and one is more descriptive and the other is more poetic and lyrical and evocative. So for example, I have them here. For example, panel number 15 is the expanse of Audrey, ease of flight, depth, wings fueled by generators and palm wine. Audrey holds us up. And this is the first one. The second one is Audrey and pool number 2, above and beneath. So one is telling you what the elements you're seeing, and the other is more, it's not a story, but it's a suggestion of a situation, of a lyrical situation. There's another subtitled, It Was From Water to Water We Return. That's the second is Ada Top Dives. I find it very, I mean, also when you propose the title for the project, which is How to Be Enough, that is maybe worth to say something more about, because also the title has several dimensions. So you really are able to create techniques, but also using titles and words and the way to install the panels, which are all differently distanced from the back wall. So it's everything is like multi-layering, and you can feel it physically and also mentally going through the reading of the work.
Yeah, I think about layering a lot just in the process of drawing. That is essentially what, if I am approaching a piece of paper and adding elements, I am building layers, and sometimes you can see the layers and sometimes you can't. But same with the presentation of the piece and also with the titles. I love writing and I love playing with language, and at different points, like when I was in college, for example, I did a lot of work with text as a visual, and haven't in a while, but it's still a place for me to be that person, to still get to incorporate something that I enjoy, the words being words and poetry, but with it being a separate piece kind of on its own, and then the visual being its own piece. And with the double title, it was fun. I haven't done that before, but it was fun to think about two sides, if each of the piece could be read in two different ways. And one was just giving direction and an objective, and there's no motion or subjectivity in it. It was, this is what is happening. Then that was the second part of the title, and then the first one is how I might typically play with titles and get round and about with the words. But it was a good separate piece and separate project for me to then, it came at the very end, and I don't remember actually which came first, if it was How to Be Enough or the individual ones. But after the work was done and when we were on crunch time, then it was nice to switch my brain and say, okay, now it's language time. What can the language do to add to the piece, but also to be its own thing? And maybe I could add that the How to Be Enough as an overall title comes from thinking about paper, one, and paper living on its own in a final presentation without additional visible armatures, without frames, without it having to then become something else. This is paper, things have happened to it, and now the paper is here and you interact with the paper as it's enough. And then the other part, thinking about the minimal quality of the work and using just a few elements and not feeling pressure or obligation to fill the page. I have written on my studio wall, I do not have to do a lot, in quotes. And that less sometimes for me is there's complexity in that, and it's a hard mental challenge for me to arrange so few parts, but to allow myself to do that without thinking this going to carry itself, and knowing and trusting that it is and it can.
It's not easy to keep and create a balance with few elements if you are used to use many of them, and you have to concentrate more on space and also on the breathing dimension of all these elements. So it's maybe the harder challenge, especially when you have to solve a 18-meter drawing or something. How was it to create all these in your studio?
That was part of the challenge. My studio is fairly large, but I could, wall space, I have enough for 2 to 3 of the panels. And then I would work on the floor. So I built this, it's a little bit padded, but it's also hard and flat, so I can sit on it comfortably. But my whole studio floor became a drawing board. So I would work on 1 or 2 on the floor, and then put 1 or 2 or 3 on the wall. And then I would just roll them up and put them in the corner and not see them for weeks. I'm like, oh, which one did I do? How does that fit in the next one? So for this piece, I had to make a model, a small model, and was using that as a way to go back.
Was it the first time that you use a model, or it's a thing you do when you?
No, I've never. I make a quick sketch in my sketchbook, but I've never done a model. So that was
Great.
So many new things in this project.
So it's worth to include a picture of the model in the book, definitely. The first model. We should document it.
I just dropped it off at the print studio. They're going to photograph it and send a file.
Great. Any question by now from, yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, as you said, you're interested in the different depths of paper and the life it had to be shown. How do you deal with conservation?
Oh, yes, conservation. Well, thankfully, the team there was great and instrumental on that component. All of my paper is archival paper, and the materials that I use are all their traditional drawing materials, and they have their pH balance and whatnot. So I'm not putting too much onto the paper that will deteriorate so much or so fast. But definitely for this one, I initially was thinking about coating the paper with plaster, coating the back of the paper with plaster. And thankfully, the team said, no. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, well, what will work? What materials will last and will not alter the paper too much and will achieve the results? So I think the biggest side of the conservation of this was driven by the preparators there, and it was great to have those conversations, and they did tests and whatnot. But I think paper, as it is now, the work still gets rolled and it holds itself. It of course can be ripped, yes, but if it is kept, I'm in the camp that paper lasts. We know paper can last for centuries, and still have life, like the manuscripts from, I don't know, 15th, 16th century, and the color is still there and the print is still there. Like, so I think that this book, and now with the additional, it has more protection than it did before with the coating. So I think it will last.
We're quite easy about this, because in the end, we proposed Ruby to obtain this structure on the back of the sheets, different materials, with our restorer, which is a specialist in paper in addition. So we're very in safe hands. And there were tests of more, let's say, invasive kind of effects on the back, created with a paste of cellulose. And this was also interesting because it's the same base from which paper comes. That Ruby wanted to obtain was a very light, wavy effect. So we just our restorer, not us, but very delicate and professional hands took care of the application of a mixture of water and a light vinylic glue in the back. So that's perfectly conservative. And of course, what we decided together with Ruby was to ship the drawings before this treatment. So they may travel rolled up in a crate without any single problem, and now they're here because the work will be part of the collection, so it will stay here, and we hope it will travel again for other exhibition, but it's staying in our collection. So we're very prepared to conserve it in the best way, because we know that all materials are kind of fine from this side.
Thank you.
I would like to ask a question. I found it, thank you, first of all, it was very, very interesting, all the explanation, and thank you, Sarah, to ask about the title, because I was very, very curious. But you already talked about a question that was in my mind since the very beginning when I saw the pictures, and we saw some photos on your Instagram. So I saw the paper on the floor. So I was like, okay. So the paper with these dimensions, of course, you were saying that you have some on the wall and some on the floor. But is there any difference for you, as you were saying, that you are very interested in the movement and dance, and this is all about movement, kind of. Is there any difference on, for you, do you consider it's different on even the performance of the drawing when you draw on the floor or when you draw on the wall? Because it is different, no? Like, is it important for you? Do you do this difference? I mean, when we see the drawings, or how do you put your body in it? It's completely different, no? I don't know.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about it.
Well, and I don't draw with the work up on the wall. Like on the wall is after and I use the wall in my studio as a storage place. But all of the creation of the work, the drawings happen on the floor. So typically, I go between, this piece, everything was on the floor. The general work, I work on the table, sitting down or standing, and then also on the floor. And I love to be on the floor because the paper's bigger than me, obviously, and I like to sit on it, and I like to lay on it, and I like to move around it and put things under my feet when I want to hop over it like little islands, or I have my feet off the side and I know I can pull it, but I'm not going to. But there's that possibility of ability to sit inside of a work and to live there for several weeks. I'll watch movies while I'm drawing, and I spend after doing fun. I spent so many hours. My body has been tired.
I'm sorry, Ruby, I can't hear you very well. I don't know if others can, or it's just a problem of mine.
Sometimes a bit better, others it's the sound. It seems that you're underwater.
Okay. Oh, but yeah, I was just saying that I enjoy living inside the drawing and spending time, and that's an accumulation of time. You have weeks, days, and weeks and months where the drawing has sat on the floor, and I leave and I come back and it goes to sleep, and I go to sleep and I come back and I have breakfast or I watch a movie, but we've spent time, our bodies have spent time together. And I think that for me, I don't have an interest in working on the wall because I can't enter it in the same way. There's always going to be a distance. I can interact with it, but I can't be inside of it like I can. I have pillows. I really lounge on the drawings and get comfortable with that. And I enjoy that relationship of my body to the paper, and also the time of around it, jumping over it, and all the things that can happen when it's your roommates. And anyone that's had a roommate, it's a negotiation of space, and we have to work together, and I enjoy that on the floor.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Ruby, I just wanted to ask because at the Peggy Guggenheim, they're immersed in Jackson Pollock's works. So I'm really thinking about is there anything ritual in this, in your way of working with the paper on the floor?
You said a ritual?
Yeah.
I'm sure I have many. None that I'd have to think. I mean, one ritual that I've been doing, I'll roll out the paper and we'll cut, or I like to rip it. So I'll do that if I'm preparing for a piece, and I'll let it sit on the floor for several days untouched. And I give it time, I guess, to settle itself. It's been rolled up for how long it's been in a factory. It came to me, but I'll never unroll and begin. I'll always unroll and give the paper some time to reacclimate, and then.
But do you feel drawing as a ritual? I mean, as something which is like something to do with spirituality, or a process where really the body becomes an instrument tool to really enter the drawing, and just like Jackson Pollock frame in this more if the work.
Totally, and it goes back and forth, but yes, there are many moments that something can switch off in my head, and I have a lot of drawing muscle memory. So there are things drawing wise, whether I'm drawing a figure and it's representation, observation, I'm trying to make it look somewhat like the image. Then there are transfers, which are a different process for my hand. But many times in the work, I do switch off, and it does become. I love that idea and that conversation about the spirituality in art making, and I definitely relate. I never think of making the works as me making the work. I have to commune with the materials. I have to respect them, and we have a conversation, and we do this together. And sometimes my body has to take a step back so that the materials and other things can move forward. And sometimes there's some conflict there, but I do think that I am a part of the process. My hands can become a machine and can be doing a thing like they're possessed. and I can see it happening. I know, okay, this is what needs to happen right now, and I'm watching it. I feel like that a lot, where I've left my body and I'm seeing
something happening. And you're just act as a medium to what is happening.
Yes, very much.
It's also kind of maybe trance, also connected with really with physical experience, like in a real trance, or while you're very, I mean, exhausted from a long running, or a long swimming, or a very hard dance or something, when you're really, your body is really exhausted and you can't really control neither the body, neither what's happening in your mind in these moments. It's just happening something, you are part of it, but without any kind of control or conscience of what is happening.
Yeah, well, and that many different levels of consciousness, and because I might be working with ink, that's one separate thing, then graphite and having to do this, or working with transfer and having to really have aggression. And I think I have a certain sense of who needs to show up depending on what part of the process. And some of them require me my body to step back and become trance-like, and others require me to be very present in a focused sort of way, and it goes back and forth throughout the drawing. I enjoy.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to make you a question, Ruby. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Hi. So talking about rituals and your creative process, I was wondering during lockdown period, like, I don't know where you were physically, so if you could like go to your studio, you were working from home, or even if you like reach out to work during that period, and if anyhow it affects like, I don't know, the spatial awareness, or did you feel like something changed in the format or the way you're working changed during that period and that you have kept till now?
Listen, I did have access to it, so I'm in Philadelphia, and throughout when the first lockdown happened, my studio building that I'm in did not close to people who had, individuals who had. So I was in that category, and I could come to work throughout and not had access to my studio, thankfully. Um, so in some ways, in many ways, nothing changed. I still maintained the same schedule, still same, and the building still felt the same. Nothing felt different. So I can't say I did, of course, then start to feel like it became more of a sanctuary. You know, when places where everyone in the house each other. So it could be more of that one, like more of an escape and a safe place for me to hide. But work-wise, I can't say that quarantine really affected me. I'm just so thankful to work and yeah, to have a place at times where I can turn off. I haven't felt any need to make work about quarantine, for example, which some people are, and that's of course perfectly fine. But I've continued my research and continued making drawing that I was.
We have some troubles with microphones, Ruby. We can really understand like maybe the half of what you're saying, and that's very a great pity. I don't know what it is. It's just like a watery effect on some sentences. Do you hear well?
I hear well. I'm checking. My microphone seems fine, but I can hear everybody when
Now it's perfect. Now it's perfect.
In short, hopefully this comes through, but in short, not much changed. I still worked in my studio in a similar way that I did before.
Thank you.
Maybe as I can't see your name now, but as you were asking, Ruby is based between Philadelphia and New York. Now she's in Philadelphia now, but she has a very itinerant biography in terms of countries, because she was born in Nigeria, and then she moved to the UK, and then she moved to the US, and then she came back to Nigeria for 1 year, Ruby, for a scholarship in 2012. And so she's very, I mean, if you saw her website, she wrote these beautiful things, which is, she calls multiple places home. So maybe it's also for this that she may feel home wherever in the world, more or less, and that's very nice.
Yeah, I have a curiosity. Hi, Ruby, again, and thank you for your precious words. It's always interesting hearing you talk about how to be enough. I'm curious about your references. For instance, do you think about a specific dancer or maybe an athlete or swimmer, also, I don't know, for drawing the body or something?
For swimming, no. I search imagery online and collect the ones that are of interest to me, but they may vary from photographs of amateur swimmers that somehow work their way into the internet or world, to professional swimming photography. Dancers is more directed from my end. There's some dancers like Tina Bausch, one, and many that actually came from the Hudson School in New York in the, I think it was the 70s. Now I'm going to be blanking on all the names. Yvonne Rainer, Trisha Brown, Merce Cunningham. And then those are some that I have been returning to for a while. And then I will intentionally search for and try to seek out dancers of color, dancers of African descent or Indian descent, and have found a few. So the reference in How to Be Enough is one of the early Black ballerinas in the US, Judith Jamison. Quote me on the last one. But I titled the piece with her first name, Judith. So I will make intentionally search and try to find the history of within dance, and I have within swimming too, not as much. We'll find like, has there been a Black Olympic swimmer, or what are the conversations in dance happening in Sri Lanka or in Pakistan or outside of a Western context? And then we'll save some of those images too. So this is one example of that, but the first names that I mentioned have been some of my earliest introductions to the type of dance that I'm interested in, and they will remain. And then on top of that, I will start to dig and find other, Okwe is another one. Ralph Lemon is a Black choreographer whose work I've been interested in. So these are some to start. It's growing.
But this Ruby, this is a very specific, because this diver, because you asked me if we should contact Nino Migliori.
Yes, but the diver one is specific. But that one that's coming from a photograph, and the reason of course I asked is because is he from Reggio?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's based in Bologna. So if you'll come to Italy, we may also organize. He's kind of old, but very kind. Apparently, I never met him in person, but I have several friends who met him and know him, and it's like a lovable person. So maybe we can also.
Mm-hmm.
This is very iconic for an Italian eye.
I love this photo. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. So that stumbled on that because I'll search different keywords, or things will lead me to other things, and then I'll save the ones that are of interest. So this one, I didn't know of his work prior. I didn't intentionally seek it out, like I might look for Merce Cunningham's work, for example. But I was so happy to find it, and it touched on so much of what I feel in the work and what I'm wanting to communicate. So I was excited to draw from it and to pay homage in a way to an Italian photographer and have the work in Italy. But that is an exception to the swimmers being that one one in specific.
Thank you very much.
I would like to ask another question if no one else wants to ask any questions. I just saw now that there's this man now on the drawings, but I was wondering because before we would see this Italian man, you were talking only about women dancers, women swimmers, women names, women, and about yesterday was the International Women's Day, and maybe that is also why I'm very interested in this topic. I'm not going to elongate myself a lot, but also because yesterday was such a special day, and also because in this Zoom meeting we're all women again, and we're always in such a girl power in the represented by the PGC, because right now we have 6 interns and they're all women as well, the staff at the PGC as well. So maybe also because
Staff del Collezione as well.
Exactly. I was wondering if that's an interest of you, and also because the name of the exhibition is How to Be Enough, and maybe I'm having my own interpretation of everything, but I was wondering if you, which is amazing, yes, but was wondering if it's something that interests you, this topic of more of a feminist side, let's say, or you don't think of it, it's just out of like it's just random that you do, although I understand that creative practice is never random, I do believe this, but I don't know, could you talk a little bit about it? I was just curious.
Yes, sure. I mean, for I am with you on girl power, and I do think about that very much. And with the work, Audrey the Leopard is the only one that presents as, I always talk about them as they, them, and they present as male, but I generally think of them as, not generally, I think of them as a non-binary fluid character who just happens to look like a man. But the rest of them, and the ones that are missing now, remember I cut many of them out. They were either female or woman identifying, which is specifically ADA, or they were non-binary. But very intentionally, they were not men, very intentionally. And I do go to that space and acknowledge that space of identifying as a woman and a woman artist, and making large work or drawing or whatever it is, and your interpretation in part of the How to Be Enough. I can't say that was not considered, whether it's me being a woman, me being Black, me combining those two and making minimal drawings, when a lot that is happening in contemporary Black art in America that is not minimal, and having to take that space and say that it's enough for me in this package. So yes, I think women are great and want to keep aligning with those conversations and separating intentionally, or trying to be a part of actively, it's a big phrase, to dismantle the patriarchy, and we're nowhere near it, but that's the train that I am on in my life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I would like to ask you another question if there are no other questions. I'm very interested in the performance that is planned to happen in June. I was wondering if it's going to be related strictly to your dance practice, or is it maybe will it be connected with your interest in the materiality of paper, as you were talking in the beginning, or could you reveal a little bit about it already, or is it too early?
also how is the collaboration with the Collezione Maramotti going on right now when you're in different places and preparing this project? Could you say a little bit about it?
Sure. I am keeping it and thinking about it as a separate project and piece. So it's not going to directly connect to the drawing or to my interest in paper or this project specifically. But it's still me that's going to be making this dance. In part, I have collaborators. So I think that the same essence of my hand that's in the drawn work will carry through in my movement work. My aesthetic isn't changing. I'm still thinking about a lot of the similar things and just translating it or using a different medium. So as of now, I've worked with performance a little bit with friends usually, and been a body in their work. So this is the first piece that or one of the first full dance piece that I'll be creating, and have partnered with a friend of mine who I met through another dance company or movement company. And we clicked and just was speaking the same sort of language. I remember when I met her and I asked if she was and she's trained. I am not a trained dancer, but she's someone who has come through very traditional training. And I remember talking with her and asking if she was a dancer, and she was like, no, I'm interested in like dance language, or, you know, the poetry of dance or the body or things like that. That for me, it's like, you know, ding, 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 we are on the same page. So it's built from there. We've done a lot of work together, and our rehearsals right now, we're no longer able to meet in the studio, which is sad, but we'd started to move together. But outside of that, we would meet and we would talk poetry. We would talk ideas of space. We had plans to go on a rehearsal that was a walk, and us kind of sharing like what we were seeing and what we were feeling on this walk. Another friend has joined who's also thinking similarly, and we are interested in the process of making a dance, and not so much building something that is finite, but something that we're stacking a pile of things that perhaps are very random. And as time goes on, we will then look at that pile and we'll start to pull out the connections, and the dance will be in there. But it's not being made from here. It's being made in a very organic sort of way, I would say. So that's, we rehearse, we meet, we talk, we're sharing ideas. We have documents where we're throwing in sound. Another example, she gave me a sound podcast that was an experiment. It described itself as an experimental collage of sound. And the person who made it, each episode is about 30 minutes, and it's poetry and it's sounds from the environment, and they're layered together in an abstract, but also a complete way. It's not background noise. So things like that are where we are in the process, where we are thinking about the environment, we're thinking about sounds. We don't know at all how we're going to move, but we are building it, and are very excited about that. And we're not in the space, obviously, so there'll be some element of this that will have to shift and reconfigure itself when we get there. So we'll build maybe 70%, and work with the team there, like, oh, these are some of the things that we need in terms of light or set. But when we get there, we'll have to take all of that and shuffle it, which will be part of the process. Does that reveal something?
It will be very site specific.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very interesting that you're trying to deal with movement in a period of our lives, so the life of humanity in which we all feel stuck and we cannot really move. So I find it very interesting.
Yeah, we can't move, and we don't know yet at this point. Like in one rehearsal, we had to wear our masks in the space, of course, but in one rehearsal, I think either I touched her foot or she touched me, and there was a moment of like, touched another person. But so I don't know at this point if that will be how we'll be able to work together exactly, but parts of the things that are affecting us all and the way we think about movement.
Interns, do you have any question? No? Okay, so I might ask another one if they don't if they don't want to ask anything. I was wondering because the colors that you don't use a lot of colors, and the ones that you use, they are pretty. How can I say? They cannot pass without us thinking why the. I think it's yellow or green, the fluorescent one, or why the fluorescent pink, or why the that, because they are really, I don't know, they really strike our attention. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about why this choice of colors, the specific ones. Are those some, like it's a choice of colors that it's recurrent in your work, or is it about this specific installation?
Yeah, the colors are recurrent. The fluorescent I've been using for that character specifically, and for Audrey. Audrey's body is fluorescent, and then the leopard head. So I have that actually right here. This is the color. But I've been using this color for that character since 2012 when she was invented. That was the color that she came in. This was when I was in Nigeria, and I am Nigerian. I assimilated quite fine. I didn't have any issues of otherness, but in contrast, I was constantly perceived as an alien of sorts, and that's where that character came from. Like, what does it mean to be an alien in your homeland, technically? And part of that alienness was my complexion. In a majority that were darker than me. Oftentimes, not always the case, but there were many times that my complexion stood out. So that's where that fluorescent came from and stuck with me. And I don't even really see it anymore as being fluorescent. I have it around a lot. I enjoy the color, but it also has become kind of a muted non-color for me. My drawings before this chapter were all black and white. So remember, I'm coming from grayscale. There were years of drawing with no color. So any color at all for me had to feel like a non-color, if that makes any sense. Even if it's blue, even if it's yellow, I'm still interpreting it through eyes of grayscale and not through the eyes of, let's say, a painter who has maybe a different relationship to working with color. So same with the blue, it was kind of functional. I was making pools and thinking about blues and greens and purples and silvers. Occasionally I'll do a pink swimming pool. I do have a affinity for pink, great color. But the pools, that color was kind of very simply my swimming pool color. So I think when there is color, it's not about it reading as color or having a meaning beyond its very practical function. yellow skinned person. She's not black, she's not white, she's not, you know, gray, she's yellow. That's the color that she is. And the swimming pool, for the most part, is blue. And there's a lot that can happen in the blues, and the yellow can be read in many different ways, but for me, it's more function, and also how can I use color as someone who draws with pencil and not as someone who loves color.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's very interesting.
Underwater, or am I coming through?
Sorry?
Am I still sounding like I'm underwater?
Sometimes yes, others, but it's a bit better, no?
Yeah, I think it's better. I got pretty everything you said this time. And it's very interesting because you use colors which are kind of primary, but they're not. Because it's yellow, it's blue, it's magenta. So it's really like toner, but they're very, I mean, they're fluorescent or very and as you were saying, there's many things which may happen inside the blue pool. Because when you told us, I just watched look at one of your pools, and it's actually very, I mean, very different kind of of colors inside here, and also pink, which make violet, or I mean, it's not just flat blue or something. So it's giving you this sense of basic color, primary color, but they're used in original ways, like you were saying, the yellow for skin and architectural elements, which is not so so frequent, but in the same time they're not flat. No, and also because you have the graphite also at the base, so the graphite a bit, I mean, this is graphite and yellow, and it's changing the yellow. It's not just color, it's very combined with the graphite.
It's incredible that you can really see now the video, the paper and the foldings of the paper. Not foldings, but I mean the texture. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see it in person, actually. Unfortunately.
Yes, please come.
Let's hope.
Sarah, I've never thought about the primary color combination, but you're right.
Me neither, just now, speaking about colors. And black, graphite, something like black. So they're really the three toners and the black, and you may hide. We're done, or is there any last question for Ruby?
Okay, Federica.
I just wanted to say, are you maybe gonna in the future be interested in adding other colors or even layers? As you were saying, you're interested in layering. So you're not you're not interested in layering colors yet, as of now?
Not so much. I think that the ones that I'm working with feel like part of the elements. And since the vocabulary is small, they each have their place, and that's what I want to keep figuring out, the relationship. So when I speak about layers, it's more about layers of paper and layers within the drawing, but not so much layers of color. The exception, the pool is that exactly. The pool is built from, you know, anywhere from 5 to, let's say, 15 layers of ink. But that's specific to the pool. And yeah, I really honestly don't think about color much beyond the ones that are here.
Okay, so I think we're done with the questions from our side. Girls? No. Thank you so much, Ruby. And thank you so much, Sara and Chiara. And thank you. It's always so interesting. And it's such a blessing to be able of do this still. Let's hope.
Finger crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this meeting.
Thanks to you for your
Thank you.
participation.
It's so interesting. Every time we have a conversation, we discover something new. So we will keep going, Ruby, until July, no problem. Okay. Be prepared.
Dialogue.
Sounds a bit like menacing, maybe, but thank you so much, everybody, and I really hope to welcome you here as a real physical bodies, and hopefully maybe in the occasion of the performance by Ruby. We don't know. We are planning it for late June, so we hope that we will be a bit calmer and may plan this.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
We stay tuned.
Exactly. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.